We had thought going into week six's main daily fantasy football slate that things may be a bit gross because of weather. And weather definitely did contribute to a very low scoring week, but also a lot of key upsetting injuries across the NFL to players we really, really enjoy, like Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, and some fun quarterbacks too. And luckily, it sounds like most of those are not long term, but still big takeaways from a DFS perspective. We're going to break down those injuries, outline what they mean, and take a look forward to week number 7 in daily fantasy football. Welcome on into the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and FanDuel Research. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a managing editor of digital media for FanDuel Research, here to recap week number 6 in the NFL, break down key DFS takeaways, and take a look forward to salaries on the week 7 NFL DFS main slate. Before we dive in and break down all of that, quick reminder to make sure you're subscribed to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed wherever you get your podcast. We are here every Monday for the recap show, every Thursday for the preview show with myself and Brandon Gadula. We also have UFC via Austin Swaim and NBA back next week with Tom Vecchio and the Daily ISO. To get those shows, search for the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. Hit subscribe, and if you like what you hear, leave us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Also, the Heat Check NFL shows do go up on the FanDuel YouTube page and FanDuel TV Plus as well. Snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That is $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there is no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There is a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, totals, and more. So visit FanDuel.com and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Must be 21 plus and present in select states. FanDuel is offering online sports wagering in Kansas under an agreement with Kansas Star Casino LLC. First online real money wager only. $10 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit FanDuel.com/RG in Colorado, Iowa, Michigan, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Tennessee, and Virginia. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342 in Arizona. 1-888-789-7777. Or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut. 1-800-9-WITH in Indiana. 1-800-522-4700. Visit ksgamblinghelp.com in Kansas. 1-877-770-STOP in Louisiana. Visit mdgamblinghealth.org in Maryland. 1-800-GAMBLER.net in West Virginia. 1-800-522-4700 in Wyoming. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. Now, our headliner here for week number 7 is going to be, or week 6 is going to be the injuries on the 49ers, because both Christian McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel ruled out early for the 49ers. For McCaffrey, an oblique injury, Samuel a shoulder, and doesn't sound like either injury is going to be a long-term thing, but could miss some time. And that's a big thing because this offense is among the best in football, and taking out those guys matters in terms of efficiency for Brock Purdy, but also could make Brandon Ayuk and George Kittle more enticing assets for DFS than they typically are. Brock Purdy did struggle quite a bit without them. Brutal defense he was facing, really bad weather too. They didn't get to game plan around those absences, so there are excuses here, and those definitely do matter and are very much valid. Purdy averaged -0.29 passing net expected points per dropback. Again, NEP is numberFire's expected points number. League average around 0.1, and Purdy at -0.29, so rough day there. Brandon Ayuk finished the game with 10 targets. George Kittle had just 2. Ayuk has a 30% target share in the games he has played this year. That's still playing alongside McCaffrey and Samuel. Kittle is at 13% in those games, but he would get a boost here if McCaffrey and Samuel do miss time. And Ayuk's deep target share is 46%. As for the backfield, Jordan Mason outsnapped Eli Mitchell 27% to 13%. But this is Mitchell's first game back from his knee injury, and he got in just 2 limited practices during the week on Thursday and Friday. Mason has a 53% success rate this year on his 21 carries. Mitchell's at 22%, so I wouldn't assume Mitchell automatically becomes the lead back for this team if McCaffrey does miss time. That's the one area where I'll want to see some reporting, because it's pretty up in the air who would be the lead back here if McCaffrey misses time. It's worth taking chances on it because this offense is so good. They're so efficient from a rushing perspective. And that would translate, I would think, to Mason or Mitchell if they fill in for McCaffrey. But I know that I will want Ayuk. And Kittle is more in play with less target competition in play here. So they get the Vikings Monday night. That game is not as fun as it would be if McCaffrey, Samuel, and Justin Jefferson were all healthy, but still not a bad game Monday night. I would say Ayuk is a massive, massive priority. Looking at the single game slate there, if McCaffrey and Samuel can't play, I think you're looking at having him in the MVP slot on FanDuel a pretty good amount of the time. Kittle would be in play for that too. It's a big impact to this team when you don't have mouths to feed in there. Purdy would get downgraded. The 49ers offense would get downgraded, but definitely intrigued by that 49ers team, specifically with Ayuk, would bump him way up. And again, I want to hear more about the running backs before reacting there, but I would not assume Mitchell winds up being the lead back, even if he is healthier this week, just because Mason has played well enough to have at least some sort of a role in this offense going forward. Let's talk about the other injuries impacting the week 6 main slate. David Montgomery left Sunday's game with a rib injury and did not return. Craig Reynolds filled in and really dominated snaps. Jahmyr Gibbs has a hamstring injury. Zonovan Knight is done for the year. So it's really kind of just Josh or Craig Reynolds left standing here. Reynolds had 10 carries and 2 targets on 27 routes. Now, the one takeaway here would be, obviously, you could look towards Craig Reynolds because he's probably going to get a decent amount of work in an offense that we do like. And that's one takeaway. Other takeaway, though, is that they could wind up being more pass heavy if they're down their top 2 backs. And we kind of did see that on Sunday. Amon-Ra St. Brown had 15 targets in this game. Sam Laporta had 11. Jameson Williams did score a long touchdown, but it came on just 9 routes run. So Williams, to me, is not a guy I can turn to as of yet. I'm fine with Craig Reynolds. The other guys can't go, but I think it does actually boost Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta as well. So looking forward to next week, we have the Lions taking on the Ravens. Let's play Name That Salary. And again, Name That Salary, where I toss out a salary I think is appropriate for a player on FanDuel for the upcoming main slate. And if the number I say is lower than the actual number, that player may be a value. If the number I say is higher, then that player, probably not a great value on FanDuel for the week, at least looking at the way things stand right now. As far as Craig Reynolds goes, they don't really have a lot of options. Seems like they do trust him a decent amount. If we assume that there's no Montgomery and no Jahmyr Gibbs in that game, I would say 7,000 would be an appropriate salary for Craig Reynolds, and he is at $5,600. So keep close tabs on Montgomery and Gibbs. Obviously, if one of them can go, then we're not going to be in on Craig Reynolds there, but I think that's a very enticing salary. So we'll keep tabs on Craig Reynolds, see if Montgomery and Gibbs can go, because if not, Reynolds 56 would be kind of like a borderline free square for DFS in week 7. Kyren Williams hurt his ankle late against the Cardinals. Sean McVay said he thinks that Williams will be okay, and that's good because Williams finally had a good rushing game, at least rushing half. Second half of that game, he was really productive. 20 carries for 158 yards. No targets in this game, and that does make sense with Cooper Kupp looking really, really good and Puka Nacua absorbing a lot of work as well. So even if Williams is good to go, I am going to downgrade him just because there's more target competition, and that is a concern for sure. The touchdowns and carries should be there, but the passing game work might be hard to come by. They're facing the Pittsburgh Steelers next week. They are at home. Total in this game is 42.5. It's indoors, which is always a good thing. But I would say Williams probably, I would bump him down to like 78 or so for next week, and he's 85. So keep tabs on the injury. But I think it's fair to be a bit more skeptical of Williams, given that the passing game work may be tougher to find for him in the near future. Trevor Lawrence, a knee injury. He is day-to-day, according to Ian Rappaport of NFL Network. Missed the final few snaps of Sunday's game. They were up pretty big, but they play again Thursday. So he said he's okay. Rap Sheet said he's okay. he's probably going to be fine. But if Lawrence can't go, their backup is CJ Beathard, and that'd be a significant downgrade. I will say right now, betting markets seem to be assuming Lawrence will go because last I checked, the Jaguars were 1.5 point favorites against New Orleans. So it sounds like everything's pointing to Lawrence playing, which is great because we want to have ETN for that single game slate, want to be able to get to, I mean, obviously use them for a single game slate, but like, I want to feel better about them. So hopefully he's okay. That'd be a big bummer not to have him for that game, but we'll keep tabs on Trevor Lawrence. I think he should be good to go. Justin Fields has a dislocated thumb and had to leave early for the Bears. Sounds like they're going to be doing imaging on that today to find out what the timetable is for Fields. Tyson Bagent took over, undrafted rookie. There was some hype around him heading into the combine about maybe he can get drafted, stuff like that. Didn't get drafted, but did beat out Nathan Peterman for the backup job on this team, which is, I mean, not that difficult, but it's significant that he did earn that backup spot. But Bagent struggled here. I mean, it makes sense. You know, comes in off the bench, cold, not practicing as a starter. Very tough weather in Chicago yesterday. But Bagent lost 11 expected points on his 11 dropbacks. So Fields is not perfect, but he's likely to be a much better option for this offense than Bagent. And that's a bummer because DJ Moore was getting a lot of work. The backfield was honestly kind of disgusting. About a 60% snap rate for Deontay Foreman in this one. So I would hope that Roschon Johnson's back. If Roschon Johnson is back and it's Bagent, though, that might be tough to get to just because I don't expect this offense to be very productive with Bagent being in there. They get the Raiders, not the best defense, but also they've played pretty well recently. So, you know, I think it'd be a significant downgrade to not have Fields for that game. Jimmy Garoppolo left Sunday's game with a back injury. Brian Hoyer replaced him, and it sounds like Garoppolo may miss week 7, but maybe not super far beyond that. And Hoyer played fine, didn't take a sack, averaged 10 passing yards per attempt. But I also would not be shocked if they went to Aiden O'Connell again if Garoppolo misses time, because O'Connell took a lot of sacks in his one start, but he's likely got better longevity than Brian Hoyer does. Either way, the question is whether the quarterback play will be good enough to support the pass catchers. I think the answer may be yes, as long as they continue to funnel work to Jacoby Myers and Devontae Adams, but also now Michael Mayer, because Mayer played 82% of the snaps this week. Previous high for him was 67% back in week number 5. Mayer had 6 targets for 75 yards. Myers had 7 targets. Adams had just 5, but did get banged up really early in that game. Took a hard hit, left to get checked out, but then came back in. If Michael Mayer starts earning targets, that'll dilute things a bit for the pass catchers, but it means we need more efficient quarterback play to get by. But I think that Myers and Adams will likely continue to get a lot of work in this offense. If Garoppolo plays, I'll be on those guys. If it's Hoyer or O'Connell, I'll be at least receptive to them if the salary and the game environments are good enough. Now, they get the Bears next week. That total is right now 40.5. And again, assuming no Fields, probably for that game, that definitely does hurt the overall environment there. So it's not a great situation for this one. So let's take a look here at, I want to see Michael Mayer's salary for next week. Again, tougher to get to if it's Hoyer or O'Connell, but at least viable. $4,900 Michael Mayer is not a bad number, given that he's going to probably get a good amount of work. So I think that Michael Mayer, a guy I'd be willing to at least consider, depending on how tight end looks in week number 7 on the main slate. Ryan Tannehill hurt his ankle against the Ravens, got carted off. Malik Willis came on in relief of Tannehill. Willis struggled last year, and he took 4 sacks on just 9 dropbacks on Sunday. Had the big screen to Tyjae Spears, but overall, rough showing again for Malik Willis. They used Josh Dobbs. I think it was Dobbs came in last year. He joined the team like super, super late, got a start over Willis for a reason. They used a 2nd-round pick on Will Levis for a reason. I think that if we get this Titans offense with no Tannehill, it would erase DeAndre Hopkins, and it would also increase the chances the Titans are trailing in a negative game script, and that hurts Derrick Henry a lot. I was not all that intrigued by Henry to begin with, and I'd be even less intrigued if Tannehill were to miss legitimate time. They have a bye week here. Hopefully it gets Tannehill healthy, but it didn't seem like it was an injury that would cost him just a week or two. So we'll hope for good news on Tannehill, but if he's out, I think this team is pretty dusty in the near term for DFS. Damian Harris left Sunday night's game with a neck injury. Pretty scary looking, so hopefully he's okay. The early reports were positive relative to what it could be, but still, you always worry about those kind of things because it did not look good there. As far as the Bills' backfield goes, James Cook still lost work to Latavius Murray, actually more work than he's lost so far this year. Murray played nearly half the snaps. He had 12 carries. Neither guy had a target. Murray also had 4 out of 8 red zone chances for this team, and Cook had just 1. The red zone stuff for Cook was a concern before, losing work not just to Latavius Murray, but also to Josh Allen. And now Murray's taking away other stuff too. Now, Cook looked good, had some pretty explosive runs in that game and had, I think, 71 yards on his 14 rushes. But if he's now going to lose early down work to Murray on top of the goal line work, I'm going to have to downgrade him even more. So it's a really tough situation for James Cook. I like the talent, but keeps getting downgraded for other stuff. So I'm pretty sour on him right now relative to where I thought I'd be at this point in the year. Final injury to note is Justin Watson dislocated his elbow on Thursday for the Chiefs. He's likely to miss some time, but sounds like it may not be long-term, but it could bump up some snaps for Rashee Rice. Rice, I was down on him last week and talked about that in the show. He didn't run a lot of routes in week number 5, but in week 6, he ran a route on 22 of 42 dropbacks, and Watson didn't get hurt until pretty late in that game. Rice also, we know, earns targets when he's out on the field. So I'm okay with Rice. Once again, it's been kind of a seesaw kind of thing, back and forth thing for Rashee Rice. But with where things stand right now, they're facing the Chargers. That is far and away the most attractive game on the main slate. I would say an appropriate salary for Rashee Rice, assuming Watson can't go, is probably around like $5,800, and he is 56. So that's not bad at all. Rashee Rice, probably a guy I'll be okay with heading into week number 7. The role, I would say the talent has shown up and has been pretty good. And if he can get that role to increase, get that snap rate to increase, we might be even better with him. So Rashee Rice, a guy I'll be targeting most likely in week number 7. Let's transition now and talk about some role updates here from week number 7. Jeff Wilson could be back for the Dolphins next week. He was doubtful this week, but did practice the entire week. But I'm honestly not sure if it matters because Raheem Mostert may be playing too well to lose time until Devon Achane is back. Mostert, 17 carries, 3 targets, 132 yards on Sunday. He had 7 out of 16 red zone chances as well. I think I want to be high in Mostert, even if Wilson is back. And I'm just gaining more confidence in him than I thought I would have. They get the Eagles on Sunday night. Mostert, from a single game salary perspective, probably in like the $14,500 range at this point. I know you have Tua Tagovailoa there. You got Tyreek Hill there. Jalen Waddle's getting more targets recently, but Mostert is earning our trust and a guy we should feel better about until Achane is eligible to come off of IR. Adam Thielen is going to force me to roster him at a non-value salary, and it's making me very, very sad. I don't want to use guys Adam Thielen's age, especially with how Thielen played last year, but he had 13 targets again Sunday. That's the 3rd game he's had with 13 plus targets this year. If we look at the 4 games Thielen has played with DJ Chark active and Bryce Young starting, Thielen's target share is 32%. He has just 3 deep targets in those games, but still has 100 yards in 2 out of those 4 games. So I don't want to go here. Guys who don't get a lot of deep work really bother me for DFS, but volume is volume. He's getting Puka Nacua early season work right now. And I kind of going to have to go there. They're on a bye this week, so thankfully I don't have to worry about it until next week. But Adam Thielen just kind of making me look really dumb for being low on him. So kudos to him, but it's annoying that I have to consider him at a very high salary. He'll probably be about 75, 77 in week 8. And I'll probably have to consider him at that number. Isaiah Pacheco continues to solidify his really improved role for the Kansas City Chiefs. He set a career high in adjusted opportunities on Thursday with 28. That is carries plus 2x targets. A career high 28 there on Thursday. Previous high for him was 26, which he set 2 weeks ago. And he had his 2nd highest snap rate of his career as well. So the snaps for Pacheco are up. He's running routes. He's getting targets. He's turning that into yards. And he's still going to miss out on goal line work to the Chiefs being weirdos towards the goal line and Jerick McKinnon as well. But I want to keep on buying Pacheco. And I think big games are very much within his range of outcomes. So Isaiah Pacheco facing the Chargers next week on a game that is very attractive for the main slate. I feel like an appropriate salary for Pacheco is $7,300. And his salary for next week is 74. So it's appropriate, but I'm okay with that. I think Pacheco will be a guy I want to turn to in a very attractive game. And we talked about Rice being undervalued a bit before, but I think Pacheco at 74, not a bad number. And I'm willing to go there in week number 7 based on the increased role Pacheco has had across the past 3 or so weeks. Saquon Barkley came back to a big role for the Giants. He had 24 carries and 5 targets, also handled 10 out of 15 red zone chances. It is very clear the Giants want to lean on Saquon Barkley when they can. The offense looked more competent with him in there. Was it because of Tyrod Taylor over Daniel Jones? Maybe, but like Saquon matters as well. I think we can handle Saquon Barkley the way we had before. Now, looking forward to next week, the Giants are facing Washington. That game, moderate total at 40.5, but the Giants 1.5 point underdogs in that game. Sounds like Jones has a shot to go. I would say with his current workload, Saquon Barkley, an appropriate salary there, is probably going to be like $8,400. It'd be higher if it were better offense, but it's not. So I'd say $84 Saquon. He is 83. So again, appropriate there. Not a bad number with how he's playing, with the workload he's getting. So Saquon Barkley, fine target in week number 7 with a salary of $8,300. DeAndre Swift had 10 targets for the Eagles on Sunday, in part because they could not run the ball, but he had 10 rushes, 18 yards, so no productivity. So he's getting work, getting passing game work in a very good offense. The one downside is that he's not getting red zone work. If we look at the 4 games Swift has played since Kenneth Gainwell came back, Swift has a 20% red zone share. So we have to keep that in mind. I'm kind of talking to myself here because I tend to like Swift in this offense, but losing red zone work to Jalen Hurts with a tush push, losing work to Kenneth Gainwell there, it's a downgrade for sure. Targets and yardage are very good. He's at least getting passing game work, but the touchdowns may be hard to come by. Kind of like an earlier career Austin Eckler, where he would not get goal line work at all. I know it's hard to think about now, given the red zone usage he gets, but I think that Swift may get enough elsewhere to overcome that, especially because it's not like he's getting nothing in the red zone, just not where you'd want it to be. We talked about Drake London and Kyle Pitts last week, and they got more usage again this week. Granted, Atlanta did throw 47 times, which is not what you want to see if your quarterback is Desmond Ritter, and Ritter struggled mightily in this game. But London had 12 targets, Pitts had 6. Across the full season, London has a 21% target share. Pitts is at 19%. They both have a 28% deep target share, and London is at 32% inside the red zone. So this is a team that will run when they can, and the passes are not efficient, but it is at least something. I've been lower on these guys for a while now, so I'm going to play and name that salary here, but I don't expect it to be a situation where I'm like on these guys. They get Tampa Bay next week, and Tampa Bay pretty good against the rush. They can probably put some points up here, so maybe it's an okay game script. I would say salary for London should probably be around $6,400, and he's 69. That's really high for me, given this offense. I would need the receiver landscape to be pretty gross, at least based on this past week where the mid-range receiver was really, really good. Paying 69 for London is tough for me, at least. Pitts, I would say 19% for a tight end who's getting some deep work. I would say that grades out around 57 or so, and he is 56, so much more into Kyle Pitts at his salary than Drake London at his, and I could see myself being on Pitts next week. It's probably not a game we'll want to stack. It's actually the lowest time for the lowest total on the main slate right now, but not totally opposed to Kyle Pitts at that salary, especially when you compare him to where Drake London is. Terry McLaurin finally started to separate in the Commanders offense. He had 11 targets on Sunday. Nobody else had more than 4. Jahan Dotson and Logan Thomas both had just 1. If we look at the full games Thomas has played so far this year, McLaurin has a 22% target share. Curtis Samuel is second that span at 18%. Thomas has 17%. Dotson 16%. So I don't really want to trust anybody here, but they do throw a lot. And McLaurin has talent that is finally translating to getting good target share. So I'm going to bump McLaurin up. I know he was 69 this past week, and I thought that was a little bit lofty, but I was at least considering him given the context of that game. They're facing the Giants this week. They're on the road. They're slight favorites on the road. I would say McLaurin probably worth around $7,100, and he's 72, so appropriate for Terry McLaurin. I think that is fine. It makes sense. Willing to get to McLaurin, okay with him, but not screaming value by any means. Jonathan Taylor got a bit more work this week than last week. 43% snap rates. He had 8 carries and 6 targets. Zach Moss had 7 carries and 7 targets. Taylor had 5 out of 16 red zone chances. I would guess that looking forward to next week, we're probably going to see JT's snap rate get to around 65% or so. Probably still not high enough to use him, but it's getting better. Now they get the Browns, so it's kind of like a pass where we can allow them to do whatever they want to do and reevaluate, because we don't really want to use them against the Browns, especially in a game with a 39.5 point total. But maybe the snap rate will go up so we can use him after that week. So JT trending up, but still not a guy I want to get to just yet. In their first game with no Justin Jefferson, the Vikings were a bit more run heavy because of the weather. But TJ Hawkinson led with 8 targets. Alexander Mattison actually had 7 targets. Madison actually dominated snaps too over Cam Akers, 78% for Madison, 16% for Akers. It's hard to tell if that was because of the wind or if they legitimately think that they should be more run heavy now without Jefferson. They did use a lot more Josh Oliver in this game, and Oliver's a run blocking tight end, so maybe they decide to go a bit more ground and poundy. But it's a bump up for Madison. I would say it's a more moderate one because of the circumstance, and they get San Francisco next week, and that's a tough team to run on. So a moderate bump up for Madison. Hawkinson had multiple deep targets for the second consecutive week. KJ Osborne, multiple deep targets for the first time this year. So I would say, honestly, it's a bit as expected. Madison might get a bump up, but Osborne and Hawkinson get a bump up to their upside at least a bit. Cousins gets downgraded. Jordan Addison, I would say it's about where we thought he'd be, not like a $7,500 guy, but like getting some work, getting deep work, team that can be efficient enough. I think that the Vikings kind of just met expectations. So no drastic deviations from what we expected going to week 6 with no Jefferson in there. The Jets stayed aggressive on offense this week. They had 21 passes to 8 rushes on early downs in the first half on Sunday. So we talked about that coming into this week where they've been a bit more willing to trust the passing offense, and it sticked. Even though Zach Wilson had some pretty bad sacks in this game, they were still throwing the football. Garrett Wilson had 12 targets. 2 of those were deep, 90 yards for Wilson. He has a 33% overall target share with 45% of the deep targets and 55% inside the red zone. Breece Hall also had 5 targets, which was a season high. He had his second highest snap rate of his career as well. His 5 targets were his most this year. The Jets' schedule opens up a lot after their bye week. Their bye is in week 7, so they're not in the main slate next week. But I think once we get these guys in easier matchups, Wilson and Hall are going to be fun assets for DFS. And I want to be on them pretty aggressively after the Jets' bye week. It's not a situation where I'm like buying into Zach Wilson, but good usage on players who can generate chunk plays by themselves. That's pretty attractive. So I do like Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall once the bye week is done for the Jets. Cardinals backfield without James Conner was a full-blown committee. Gross. Amari DeMarcado handled the passing game work. Keontae Ingram got the rushes. They are in a void for me. Trey Palmer had a bigger role coming out of the Bucs bye week. He had 7 targets on Sunday. Previous high for him was 3. I'm still going to give heavy preference to Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, but Palmer is worth monitoring as the trust in Baker Mayfield goes up. If Mayfield can develop a rapport with Palmer, he could be a guy we can turn to in DFS. Quick update here on the Texans backfield. I had said last week that Dameon Pierce was trending slightly up, and then Devin Singletary outsnapped him on Sunday. So the Texans were not a team I was considering yet in terms of their backfield, but they're back to being a firm cross-off for me. No Texans for me in the near future. Let's take a look at the salary scroll for week number 7, pulling up the main slate over on FanDuel.com, going position by position and trying to outline salaries I think are enticing for next week. Now, in terms of like slate context for next week, not a lot of great games on the slate. The big one is Chargers Chiefs. No other games of a total higher than 46 right now. There is some wind on the slate. It's not a massive factor, but a lot of totals got bet down between the look ahead line and now. So could be kind of tough to come by upside in the slate. There's also no McCaffrey, obviously, on the main slate, no Jalen Hurts, no AJ Brown, no Travis Etienne, which makes me very sad. And then Bengals are off, Cowboys are off. So we're missing some pretty fun pieces on next week's slate. Starting off the quarterback, the first guy who jumps out to me is Justin Herbert, $8,300 in that game against the Chiefs and Mahomes. It's going to be a game I'll want to stack. I know that for sure. Herbert is a guy who ran a bit more in week number 4. Obviously hurt his finger, but seemed like he's good to go. So Herbert, I think, is pretty enticing at 83. That one does stand out to me, given how good that game is compared to the rest of the slate. So Herbert, to me, 83, the first guy who jumps off the page when looking at salaries. Scrolling down a bit further, Jared Goff is 76, taking on the Ravens. Actually, Lamar at 8,000 is enticing too. I know right now there's some wind projected in Baltimore. I think it was 15 miles per hour, but it's Monday. We could see that wind total come down. Yeah, 15 miles per hour in Baltimore. So the total is low at 44. I think that's appropriate. I had interest in the over before I saw the weather. But maybe if the weather comes down, we could see Lamar being played at 8,000, Goff being play at 76. I am looking at those guys pretty hard, as I think they could be in play at quarterback in week number 7. Scrolling down further, Geno Smith at 7,000. I'm going to be there. I know it for sure. Facing Arizona, Geno obviously didn't have like the best game this past week. Had some, I thought, pretty good throws in that game, which is fun. So I would say Geno, 7,000 facing Arizona. We'll probably be looking at Kenneth Walker in that game too. DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett. So Geno at 7,000, as far as value plays go, is going to leap off the page, at least for me. Scrolling down further, Baker Mayfield, 66 against Atlanta. Very low total game. I want to see where I have that total personally as of right now. Not fully formed as of yet, but I've got the total at 40.8. So slight interest in the over, but not a ton. So probably no Baker at 66, but did want to at least point that one out as being somewhat intriguing. And that's probably it for quarterback. So quarterback, the guys who stand out, Geno among the value plays at 7,000, interesting Goff at 76, interesting Lamar at 8,000, and then Herbert 83, and of course, Mahomes at 92. Josh Allen facing the Patriots, maybe his shoulders a bit banged up right now. So a bit more tepid enthusiasm there. And I mentioned that Kyren Williams or that Kenneth Walker could be a guy we turn to in that game against the Cardinals. But FanDuel said, I don't know about that, because they put Kenneth Walker salaried up $8,800. That's pretty high. I want to check the usage on Walker. I know he scored at least once on Sunday. Yeah, it must have been once. They scored 13. So Kenneth Walker has topped 90 yards once so far this year. Is $156. He went well over that, but no more than 25 adjusted opportunities in a game yet this year. Good red zone role, so I think that's good. I think that's a little bit high for him at 88. Eckler, 94. I think that his usage in this game should be pretty good in the Chargers-Cowboys game. So I could see myself getting to Eckler. Walker at 88 might be a tougher sell for me. Much more intrigued by Barkley at 83 than I am by Walker at 88. Scrolling down further, Josh Jacobs, $8,000. Obviously depends on the quarterback situation there, but that's not a bad number for Jacobs given the amount of overall work he gets. I know the targets may not be there if we're on Michael Mayer, but he's not bad. I think he's kind of like Kenneth Walker on it, honestly. Good matchup. Not the most efficient guy from a yardage perspective, but can have big games. So I honestly think that Jacobs and Walker should be a lot closer in salary than they are right now. Scrolling down further, Aaron Jones, 77 facing Denver. I think with the way things have gone with AJ Dillon, I would bet they want to get Jones pretty involved right away. Want to see where that hamstring is at coming out of their bye week, but at least they've had the bye to get him right. So we'll see where that is. Isaiah Pacheco, 74 again. I'm pretty intrigued by that, as mentioned before, given how attractive that game is. Scrolling down further, Jerome Ford is 66. He, I think, had like 16 carries on Sunday. The problem would be if it's not Deshaun Watson at quarterback. Do we really want to go in this game with a very, very low total? Ford, 17 carries, 2 targets. Yeah, it's been a weird workload so far. 91 yards in that game. Not a lot of red zone work. They haven't really been in the red zone a whole lot, so that's part of it too. But not as high in him as I thought I might be at $6,600. Scrolling down further, we do see Rachaad White at 61. The Falcons have been very good against the rush so far this year, and White did not get a lot of work on Sunday, but did play a lot of snaps. Still around 80% snap rate. Now, if he keeps being as inefficient as he has been, maybe we see Keyshawn Vaughn or Sean Tucker start to get worked in more, but it hasn't happened yet. Yeah, the yardage for Vaughn is pretty rough, but the snaps are there. The red zone roll is okay. $6,100 is very, very low for a guy who is going to get at least some work in the passing game, probably will get some goal line work. I would not be surprised if I wind up on Rachaad White at 61. Roschon Johnson, if he clears protocol 59, that might be low enough where we consider him with Tyson Bagent. So potentially some value at running back. I mentioned before, Craig Reynolds is a possibility, 56 as well. So Craig Reynolds is there. Maybe we get to Roschon Johnson at 59. Maybe we get to Rachaad White at 61. But then otherwise, really looking hard at Isaiah Pacheco at 74. And then Saquon Barkley, 83. Maybe Josh Jacobs at 8,000 as being the key running backs next week. I would love to be able to use Eckler. So hopefully his usage on Monday night is good to justify that salary at $9,400. Going to receiver, Cooper Kupp is 97. Worth it. Totally fine with that. No objections from me there. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 82. A lot of work for him again. 15 targets on Sunday. He did not look like the injuries he's had have affected him. So I'm board with that. I think that's a very fair salary. DK Metcalf, 77. I'm curious where Tyler Lockett will wind up at, but not a bad number for Metcalf. Also, Mike Evans, 76. Facing Atlanta, I know the total of that game is very, very low, but like Evans has been getting a lot of good work so far this year. So Evans, to me, could be an intriguing play at that number. Puka Nacua down to 73. Got decent work on Sunday. Wasn't as productive, but like not a bad target share for him. Scrolling down further, Tyler Lockett, 68. I will be there. I can guarantee you that, just because Lockett is a very fun player, been getting a lot of work. I think he had another decent game on Sunday. So Lockett, 68 to me, probably a place I want to go receiver, potentially with a Marquise Brown run back, 67. I think he had 10 targets again on Sunday. Hasn't had the yardage, but has had the usage. So Marquise Brown, 67, could be a guy I look at there. Christian Watson gets the buy to get fully healthy. He's $6,600. I want to look at his numbers from the Monday night game. I know he had a lot of deep work. I think he had 4 deep targets in that game, and of course the big catch. Overall, Christian Watson, 7 targets in that game. He had 4 deep targets, and he had they didn't really run a lot of red zone plays. So Christian Watson, 66 against Denver. You have my attention, I would say, as a potential mid-range wide receiver we can go to. Chris Godwin, 65 again. No objections from me personally. Scrolling down further at wide receiver, down to the value range, not seeing a ton. Rashee Rice again at 56. Okay with that. Quentin Johnston, depending if Josh Palmer sits on Monday and then can't go on Sunday, Quentin Johnson, 55. Could be pretty intriguing. I know that he'll lose work with Eckler being healthy and with Keenan Allen being healthy, but Quentin Johnston ran a lot of routes before their bye week, has had the bye week to get more integrated in the offense. 55 could be enticing for him there. And that might be it as far as wide receiver goes. Trey Palmer's 51. So if you really need to say salary to get to Eckler, that could be a way to go. So Trey Palmer, 51, maybe a value play in week 7. Moving over to tight ends, Mark Andrews, 69. That's not a bad number. Let me see what his usage looked like on Sunday in that London game. Andrews, 6 targets there. In the games he has played, I should probably narrow this down to the games with Beckham, but Beckham's not a huge factor. 23% share for Andrews versus 26% for Zay Flowers. Might be a little bit lofty for Andrews at 68. Yeah, not a ton of deep work, only 3 deep targets for Andrews. So 69 might be a bit high. Probably more into Sam Laporta, honestly, in that same game at $6,500, which feels very weird to say. But honestly, with the workload he's gotten, it's hard to disagree with that. Kyle Pitts, 56. That might be Actually a good tight end play. I know it's been frustrating, and I know that trusting him seems daunting, but they're facing a team that can put up some points in Tampa Bay. They're a good team against the rush. So Pitts at 56, potentially a guy we turn to this upcoming week. Luke Musgrave, 5,000. I kind of want to think more about the meshing there with Romeo Dobbs, Christian Watson, Aaron Jones all getting targets. So probably not a Musgrave. The more I think about it, the less I'm intrigued by it. But then Michael Mayer, 49. I think given the workload he's been getting recently, if we get Garoppolo in that game, honestly, maybe even with O'Connell or Garoppolo, I'd be lower on him, but like still could potentially be there at $4,900. I think that's probably it for tight end. So big ones to me to keep an eye on as far as salaries go, Craig Reynolds, and then maybe Quentin Johnston as far as value plays go. But Isaiah Pacheco, probably a guy I'll want to go to just based on the workload he's gotten, his salary, Rashee Rice as well. So that the Chiefs Chargers game may not be too tough to stack, even though it has the highest total on the main slate. That is all that we have here for our week 6 recap show. We are back with you once again Thursday to give a full preview into week number 7 for DFS with myself and Brandon Gadula. Make sure you're subscribed to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed to get that as it goes live. It'll also be live on the FanDuel YouTube page at 10 a.m. Eastern. Subscribe there and also check us out on FanDuel TV Plus. If you've got any questions for me, I am on Twitter at Jim Sannes, JimSannes. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast and FanDuel Research at FanDuel Research. Want to thank you all for tuning in for today. Good luck to you with your contests across Monday night. We'll talk to you once again Thursday to preview week number 7. This has been the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.